The following vodcast contains opinions from paid professionals. The information provided in this vodcast is general in nature and not advice. For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.
So we think returns for another week. Ben Way, great to be back as we officially get into the Autumn Carnival. But before we go any further, you want to do an accountability check on as to how we went last week. But in your weird mind, you also want to flash back to last year as well and revisit a couple of things.
I do, because you know what? I was proven exceptionally wrong with one thing in particular. So I just wanted to rehash that. I love that we dressed the same, by the way. It's nice.
Nice and
The
fresh.
Via Sustina was fantastic. She had to dig deep and did exactly that, did what champions do. Shaggy, the bubble burst fairly abruptly. But we did say, we said that's the dream scenario, that Shaggy would be there up against the mice of Coolmore, etc., etc. But ultimately, that hasn't happened. And 2-year-olds can burst pretty quickly. What did you make of the performance? And it's a shame, really.
It's a shame for the story and the romance and the magic of the slipper going forward, but I can understand why the bubble burst. He'd been up and running for a long time. He'd travelled here, there and everywhere. He'd been to Coffs Harbour, up to the sunny coast, down to Randwick a couple of times from Wyong. For a 2-year-old, that's an exceptional amount of travel. Hopefully we get to see him back as a 3-year-old and he'll be a force to be reckoned with the sprinting ranks. Just on Via Sustina and Lady Shenandoah as well. Yes, they went around really short quotes, particularly Lady Shenandoah. I think just before the jump, she was $1.28 on course. I have a feeling, and we saw this last spring with Waller's great mares, and we talked about it on this very podcast about the great mares and great fillies that he has in his yard, sometimes having a dip second up. I wouldn't be surprised if those wins, as narrow as they were, but as tough as they were the dip.
Yes.
Get what I mean?
They've dipped and still won.
Correct. And that's how good they're going at the moment. Maybe that's not the case, but I do have a thought that that's maybe why they were such tough-fought victories. Yes, the competition was still exceptionally strong. The likes of Lady of Camelot over the 1,400 metres, she was immense. And then Fangirl as well, who I think has come back in the autumn bigger and better than ever, and particularly on the dry track. Third up for both of them, I reckon they'll win by streets.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. You're right. There's a model we've seen, and we'll see whether it plays out that way. So the retrospective one.
Yeah, what is this?
So remember we were talking about there being too many Group 1s?
Yeah.
We both agree there are too many.
100%.
And we'll get on to the All-Star Mile and it's ick. But when we said there were too many Group 1s, we said for fairness, you can't just say there are too many Group 1s and not nominate races saying they should probably go. Now, we both agreed the Caulfield Stakes didn't add a stack. And the other one that I suggested
Was a race this weekend that looks awesome.
was the Canterbury Stakes. Now, not only am I going to change my tune and say I was wrong, I will say this looms as I'll say it'll be in the top 2 or 3 races of the autumn.
Yeah.
So we will go into it at length later on with a special guest, I might add. But you've got an Epsom and King Charles winner in Beowulf, a Sires Champagne and Golden Rose winner in Militarise, a Randwick Guineas and Doncaster winner in Celestial Legend, Sunshine in Paris won a VRC Classic at Group 1, a Rupert Clark Group 1 winner in Magic Time, a Stradbroke winner in Steffi, a Group 1 Coolmore winner in Switzerland, a Group 2 winner in NCAP, Here to Shock won a Group 1 last start in New Zealand, Airman won a Group 2, Pericles won a 5 Diamonds, Royal Patronage won a Group 2. Blimey, that is a field.
8 Group 1 winners in the field. And I wonder if a few weeks ago, a few connections thought, maybe this is the easy Group 1 kill that we could try and target this autumn. Well, how wrong have they been?
And circumstance with Beowulf, like stars have
Correct.
had to align for it to happen.
Yeah.
And if it weren't there, yeah, maybe they would just choose a completely different path and something else would be propped up. So maybe I've jumped early by saying, no, don't get rid of it. But that is one of the races of the autumn, if not the. Now, I want to keep the Queen Elizabeth top tier, but I think there's probably more depth to this than what we'll have to that field. I could be wrong.
Possibly. It depends about the war of attrition that no doubt will occur over the next month or so. So
8 Group 1 winners there, so that's the benchmark.
That's the benchmark. Okay, we'll keep that in our minds over the next month or so. We will talk about the All-Star Mile and preview the race down in Melbourne, the Randwick Guineas, which look, I mean, you've got a $1.70 favourite. He looks incredibly hard to beat in broadside, and we'll talk about that. The Canterbury Stakes we'll get more into, and then Wotan, the 2-year-old who holds favouritism for the Golden Slipper at the moment. He races in the Todman on the weekend, one of the exemption races for the Slipper, and he does have to do something. Even though we think he is the best 2-year-old going around, whether it be in Sydney or Melbourne at the moment, he pretty much has to win. I know that maybe prize money with running second could get him into the field, but he draws a gate this weekend. He gets conditions to suit because we've seen him so effective on a soft track. We're going to get rain in Sydney over the next couple of days. James McDonald back on board, gets the 1,200 metres. I think that's going to be to his advantage. So everything is in his favour on the weekend.
And a couple of his main rivals don't need to win to be in. And I kind of think that helps as well. So currently 148,000 in prize money, 20th in order of entry, but a win, you're right, in the Todman assures that he would be in. 56,000 for second doesn't assure that he would be in, but it certainly assures him a live chance going into the next week.
Do you think it's wild, though, that this dominant favourite for the Slipper, and it's the horse that he's the only horse that people want to back, and that has been the case for the past 2 or 3 months, is not guaranteed a start at the moment?
I don't think that is as wild as Espionage not being in last year. Because, as you know, from last year, I think we need to add the Gimcrack and the Breeders into the exemption races to try to get those 2-year-olds up early. So at the moment, our exemption races are the Silver Slipper, the Sweet Embrace, the Skyline. So we've got Baybarked, Within the Law, and Rivellino tick. Then you've got the Riesling, the Todman, the Magic Knight, and the Pango Pango as the other exemptions. No Blue Diamond, no Gimcrack, no Breeders. But the Blue Diamond prize money is sufficient that if you win, you are in. So I guess my point would be, do we elevate the prize money just to make sure that Gimcrack and Breeders winners are in? Because it's 250,000. Something like a Black Opal's 200. And you get in excess of 150 for winning a restricted English Millennium. That doesn't sit well with me, and I think we're going to have a situation where good horses miss and miss regularly. So Gimcrack, for those who say, well, what's their record like in slippers anyway? I mean, Gimcrack recent winners, you've got Catch Me, Coolangatta, Platinum Jubilee, Manal, Belle Merci. None of them are going to embarrass you in a Golden Slipper. Breeders has probably fallen away. We're not going to see Ken Kirk. We know that much. And Espionage missed. But when you go back maybe 10 years ago, you had Capitalist, Vancouver, and Piero. And
So they found their way in via winning other races or upping their prize money in running.
well, maybe the prize money in the Gimcrack and Breeders then was sufficient enough because the prize money in other races hadn't gone up and English Millennium didn't exist and maybe the Black Opal wasn't worth as much and things like that. So circumstances have changed and I think we need to change with it. One thing that I did find staggering was a clause, because I was reading through the
You have a
eligibility
lot of spare
clause.
time on your hands.
Yeah, so it's called prep. I say that to a person who I know, by the way, prep's better than anyone. So clause 2.5, the Golden Slipper, the directors in their absolute discretion may exempt any horse or horses from the rejection provisions in clause 2.1. So 2.1 is the one that details prize money order as the order of final acceptance, right? And they may select emergencies and determine their priority. So clause 2.5 says, essentially, at the director's discretion, if you're exempted based on prize money, they can overrule that and put you in. That's how it reads to me.
So you're telling me if Wotan runs third on the weekend and he has this big flashing light and everyone's like, oh my gosh, he's going to peak for Slipper Day, because I want to read a quote from Chris Waller in a minute to that effect. There could be a poor little colt or filly who sits at 16th in the order of entry and they go, you know what? We need Wotan to run. Bye-bye.
I'm not saying it will happen. I'm saying the clause says that can happen. I'll read it one more time. The directors in their absolute discretion may exempt any horse or horses from the rejection provisions in clause 2.1, which details prize money order as order of final acceptance, and may select emergencies and determine their priority.
Wow, wait. Look, I think he wins on the weekend, so I don't think we're going to find ourselves in this position. And for those who have said over the last few days, you know, he needs to, it's It is fact. He needs to win or he needs to run second to be able to get into the field, other than that clause. Chris Waller's comment from this week, I'm not running to qualify him. I'm running to prepare him for the Golden Slipper, which tells you everything you need to know that this trainer has the utmost confidence that he is the horse to beat and no one will be beating him Saturday.
No, I must say, I felt as though Chris deliberately talked around, we have to win. He didn't want to say that, and he said the only thing he could logically say in response. And there's confidence there. There's been confidence from day dot, and I hope that we see Watson in the Golden Slipper, because if he does run a luckless third and we still think he's the best horse, but he's not going to be in there, that's a shame.
Yep.
Enter clause 2.5. So, we've also got an All-Star Mile to look forward to.
And look, this race has been a bugbear of mine over the last couple of years. I think I've attended maybe 5 of them over the last 7 years in a working capacity. In the first couple, they got big crowds and huge support. It was something new and sexy and flashy on the scene. But I am concerned about this race going forward, not only for the fact that we have 7 runners. And if you want to know the fields for the past few editions, 14 in year 1, 15, 15, 15, 15, 12. So they've all been not capacity fields because the capacity is 16, but they've been decent size fields. And I'm not saying that a field number determines the greatness of a race. We've seen that before.
One of the best races of the spring was a 4-horse race last year. Yeah.
But when they have pumped so much marketing and money into this race, I mean, that was a Group 2 at the Valley. This is a now Group 1 at Flemington worth $2.5 million. There are things that concern me. Public sentiment. I mean, the fact that we're talking about this and other people are talking like, does the All-Star Mile even work anymore? Is it a race that we can continue pumping huge amounts of money and resources into? That concerns me. A trainer's point of view concerns me as well, because you look at Chris Waller, he's got a couple of really, really solid milers in Sydney who won over the course of the weekend in Via Sistina and Fangirl. We love a tissue. She loves Flemington, but she's probably the third liner in that trio, and he's picked out this race for her to go to. The owner ambassadors, so once upon a time that functioned in one way, they've changed it to another way. I work in racing media. I didn't even know how the owner ambassadors were selected this year. And my mail is they've had to change a couple of them on the fly because they selected racing participants who cannot be part of this scheme. And then the prize money is the other
Randomly. Should add that. Yeah.
The other thing that irks me is the prize money. We have a new market being run, straight 6 at Flemington, time-honoured race.
It's your headline.
It's your headline, and it's worth $1 million less than this.
You know what the Newmarket handicap has? An identity. You know what the All-Star Mile lacks? Identity.
And the other
thing, doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything because we've had these win and you're in races. I don't really like that as a concept anyway. And because there's 7 or 8 of them for this race. The first 2 winners of those win and you're in races last year were Komochi. She's running in the Challenge in Sydney on weekend. And West of Africa, they've opted not to go there. So another Will goes there. He's a Group 1 winner now, and he's a horse I cannot wait to follow into the future. Mr. Brightside was always going there, even though he won a win and you're in futurity. That was always going to be his race. Feroce's not backing up from the Australian Guineas, and Marble Arch isn't backing up from the Blamey last weekend as well. Like, this is a bit of a mess.
I don't subscribe to the theory Mr. B scares people off either.
Really?
No. I'm sorry, he is a champion. His record says that. But he's not scary. Don't rock up to claim, the prize money for 3rd, 4th, 5th is ridiculous for the All-Star Mile too. So, I don't know. Yeah, we'll discuss it in 2 ticks as to whether it's a 2-horse race or maybe a 3-horse race with Tom Kitten. But either way, I think it lacks an identity. The owners, the connection in terms of people walking through the gate and eligibility to be an owner for a day type thing is just, that should disappear, just like the public vote.
I agree.
Which was really fraught with danger from
because you know why? They want these owner ambassadors to be part of the journey, and I get that. You want to engage people and have them come along for the ride. But the problem is you're selecting from people who have walked through the gates over the last couple of weeks at Flemington who were going to go to the races anyway. They're industry participants. They're industry followers. It's not like you've got 100,000 people coming through the gates on Derby Day and selecting randomly from a crowd for people who might attend a race meeting like once a year and they're excited to be part of it. Like the last few weeks, they had 8,000 on course last meeting at Flemington. Pretty much all of them are solid industry participants or members of the clubs. It just needs... I know they've tried to look at it before, but now when we've been presented with a 7-horse field this time in, and God bless Gary Portelli, I love Gaz, flying trapeze. I mean, he's said this on radio today. He knows that he's going to run last for $40,000. He might finish 6th, he might finish 5th, but he's not going to finish top 3. But he's running for last place, which is a big check, with a horse who finished 7th to Cronenberg at Doomben last start. And he's a great horse. Like, he's a really nice horse, but he's not Mr. B material.
No, he is not.
Great to welcome in our newest Tab ambassador, James Jordan, to the set. James, you've got a great history in racing. You've done plenty of things. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm nervous. It's a very hostile environment today. You've got the All-Star Mile on your sights and you found some Watergate clause that you...
I'm just saying, Watson may get in regardless. No. I'm definitely not saying that. What is a Tab ambassador?
I don't really know.
Right.
You're asking the wrong person. I think, just an all-round person that can try and add a bit here and there. I'll be doing primarily form in Melbourne, so Wednesdays and Saturdays on obviously socials and on a few of the shows as well. So looking forward to that.
But you've been a trader as well, so you understand how our books work.
Yep, not with the Tab, but I've been a trader in the past and a bookie most recently. I was a bookmaker for a couple of years and got out of that. But yeah, I've done a fair bit in that space the last probably 12 years. So I feel like I can probably provide the odd bit of insight, not much, but the odd bit of insight into the sort of how that works and the combination with bookmaking and punting.
And primarily you've been focused on South Australia and Victoria, essentially?
Yep. So, I mean, back in the day when I was a trader, it was sort of a fair bit of Victoria as well. But in the last 10 years, majority SA, obviously broadcasting over there. Focusing on the South Australian area, but you know what it's like in Adelaide. You get a lot of Victorian horses, the odd Sydney horse carnival time, but mostly a lot of Victorians, jockeys, trainers come across. So I wouldn't say it's a foreign environment for me, but it's like you get to learn about the different horses and little intricacies as well. But looking forward to the challenge.
There's a real South Australian flavour here. I mean, you're married to one.
I'm married to one.
I am one. I mean, he's one.
Yeah.
There you go.
Taken over.
Let's move to Victoria then for the All-Star Mile. And I mean, Mr. Brightside is our short price favourite, and rightfully so. He's won nearly $17 million in prize money. Do you think he just walks in on Saturday?
No, I don't think he just walks in. I sort of agree with what you said. He's not a Winx where you go, I don't want to go to that race. Like he doesn't demoralise a field to the point where you go, oh, I'm running for second. Like he gives you a chance. Like even last start, I wouldn't say it was a low win, but it wasn't like, oh, he's got plenty more in the tank. So yeah, I don't think he scares him away. I haven't priced the race yet, so I will price it. He's obviously going to be the one to beat. I'll have him favourite. But you look at, 7 out of 10 people would probably say that Tom Kitten should have beaten him last start. So
Me included.
How can you say he's immoral on the basis of that?
Yeah. I'm still feeling it.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting. And another Wills obviously was pretty good last start too. So he's the one with upside compared to Mr. B. So we'll see.
To most, it looks a race in 3. Em has made her feelings known on the race. Do you have an emotional connection with an All-Star Mile, or do you kind of agree with the sentiment that it probably lacks personality and any kind of entity?
Well, it got lost in a way. I mean, early doors when I used to look at it, I'm generally speaking, I don't like races where there's so much prize money that you get a same field for less money. I don't like that premise, but early doors with this, I would see it advertised everywhere. When it was like a voting system, you'd see the racing club and the PRA wasn't doing the advertising as such. It was the people on Facebook or the country town that had a share in this horse. So it would sort of get around. They'd let the participants, for want of a better word, do the legwork. And it did sort of get a bit of traction in maybe non-racing people. I think as the squeezes come on with turnover dropping and prize money dropping, they've had to scale the marketing of it right back, and it's probably hurt the race. But do I get a feeling in my stomach at the start when the barriers are about to open, like you're doing it? No, I won't. No. And I think it's a reminder that just prize money. You talked about the difference between even in Sydney and the other races on the card in Melbourne. Huge prize money difference. No better field. So I think that's got to be looked at too.
My concern is when you look at the meeting at Flemington on Saturday, there's a clear standout, a clear highlight, and it's not that.
Mm.
It's the Newmarket. And so, yes, if you want to create a separate entity, create one, but go away from the Newmarket. Go away from something that's tried, true, proven, and yeah, maybe doesn't draw in the crowd that it once did, but the calibre of horses are still there, so at least you can build on that. Whereas, I don't know, I agree with the marketing element of having others do it originally, but that was based on a concept where you could have horses that were, let's face it,
And they were.
not very good, getting into the field purely because they had public support. So, to me, both models are broken, but
Yeah.
either way. I do think another will be beating Mr. B, but beyond that, Tom Kitten, I feel for him.
I'll back up
That
with
was
him.
his time.
Just
You think it was
will
his
they
time?
will they ride him? I mean, he was so good because he was sort of held up, and
Yeah, and they can't do
Can
that
you do
in a
that again?
7-horse field. I know.
you can't do that again. You sort of, if he does it again and gets beaten, it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So
That does
changes
probably
things.
concern me slightly that he doesn't get the big field to be able to do that. But maybe settling 3 back the fence is
As
probably
good
best scenario for him, and enough speed on that he can rattle home. Your highlight of the day is the Newmarket handicap. So it's worth $1.5 million for the sprinters. Straight 6. You're looking for those horses who love the 1,200 metres at Flemington in particular. Where are we at with Jolly Star?
Jury's out. $5 says traders are thinking the same thing. There's such a jury's out price, I reckon, for a favourite. But either way, $5. Growing Empire, $7. I mean, my eyes were drawn towards Growing Empire and Benedetta, both of whom were second up. I guess the query is, where do you want to be drawn? Will it be a day where they're outside, or both of those are drawn towards the inside?
I would say outside. I mean, if you said you can have inside gate or outside gate, everyone would take outside gate.
Yeah.
Where they position the barriers across it can sometimes be crucial as well. But I'd imagine they'd come 2/3 of the way towards the outside. Not an outside fence job, but they certainly won't be on the inside. But it is a fascinating race. Jolly Star, and you were talking about the Waller second up sometimes, without putting too
dip?
much light on it. Yep. The way Karen McAvoy rode Jolly Star last start, that wasn't I didn't hear it, and I probably shouldn't be talking about it, but I can't imagine the instructions were just ride it where it lands, ride it how you feel. That was, last prep, this thing blew them away first up and was flat second up, fair and Everest, plain after that. We cannot have that happen. This is not the grand final. Neck it out of the gates. I want, if it's got 100% of fuel in the tank, I want it to finish with 20. I don't want to have a hard run where it flattens it for the prep. So then you go, okay, well then this is the time where it's going to run a big race. But then it's down the straight for the first time. Had a 3-horse jump out, so I had to look around. You learn nothing in a 3-horse jump out down the straight. So you don't know how it's going to go, but if it goes to how it did first up last prep, it'll blow them away.
Yeah.
So you're seeing it as almost a first up run.
Yeah. The way he rode it was like, not that he wasn't trying, but he was trying not to give it a hard run.
Don't you think that's the problem though with jockey criticism? And I think there is an important caveat to it. But we're not privy to the instructions.
Instructions, of course.
So if they ride to instruction, they're really on a hiding to nothing. I will say on that front, it's widely discussed, but there is a big difference between bagging a ride and bagging a jockey.
100%.
I'm
yeah.
all for criticising a ride because a footy player has a terrible kick, a rugby league player has a terrible pass, and a jockey has a bad ride. But there's a difference. And I think sometimes we blur the lines between the two.
I think people have found Growing Empire as well, not only because he's a colt that we think is, a real Group 1 performer for the next year or so, but partially due to the fact that where he sat in the run in the Lightning 2 weeks ago when we had umbrellas flying over Flemington, he was getting knocked around like a sail in the wind, whereas the mares who ran on were cuddled up. They got beautiful, cozy runs and were protected from all the elements. That's why I think I'm a little surprised to see the support for Stretton Angel, because she probably had every favour there that day. But also, I don't see her as a 1,200 metre horse. And she's a 1,000 metre, 1,100 metre specialist for me. So I'd be happy to look elsewhere for her. I think Jolie Star, it's a great theory that you have about her firing fresh. I don't think the straight's going to be a problem for her, because if she does find cover and then she gets the breaks when they're afforded to her, I think she can be absolutely explosive. And Growing Empire, the same fact. But there's value all throughout the page.
It's going to be one hell of a race.
Not much of a breeze this week as well. You talked about the headwind, Growing Empire cutting it last start.
Yeah.
There won't be much of a breeze at all. So I don't think settling forward will be a problem. I think they probably won't go that quick because it is that straight. They're They never really go quick in the straight, but I wouldn't be surprised if the horse is up on speed, can find a kick,
Alfred
as opposed
hasn't,
to last time.
Alfred hasn't influenced things that far south, but the rain and everything is even making its way to Sydney. I think we've got 4 or 5 days of rain in succession with a bit of wind predicted there and some good races here too.
Yeah, and that's what makes the Canterbury for me really interesting. We'll get into the Randwick Guineas to begin with, though, and broadsiding. What he did first up in the Hobartville, we've come to expect from him. We saw him do that last start, first up into a Golden Rose, and everyone's like, you can't win a Golden Rose first up. It hasn't been done in like 25 years. Well, this is the horse who can buck all the trends, and he did that last start. Up to the mile, soft conditions. He's the quality. He's the testing material. He draws a gate. He gets the best jockey in the world back on. He can flatten second up, but that's what his stats say. But I think that was probably more circumstance, say, in the Caulfield Guineas when he settled out the back and couldn't rattle home because we had a leader's bias that day. So I expect him to be handy in the run. I expect him to ping the gates more like we did last start. I think he's got that in his arsenal now. So I wouldn't be concerned with him getting back and not having the luck to run on.
It's a big asset for him to have too, because when you look at his main rival in Swift Falcon, that's probably the one drama is that positional speed.
He's a racehorse, and he wants it. He's talking about Mr. Brightside. It feels like they almost know they need to do enough to win and hold them off. Plenty of horses over the journey have done it. Octagonal never won by a space. So he's got that going for him. He is a proper racehorse. I think he likes to fight. He doesn't mind getting dirty to do it. So obviously, but yeah, you look at the runs last start. It's in isolation. If you said just to the average person, names aside, form aside, watch this race, they go, that's second horse. That one out down the outside, that's a big run. So yeah, I've got that to balance up as well.
Okay.
Aliana's the other one I've got eyes for in a way because she was huge against the Colts again last start in the Hobartville. I find it fascinating that Chris Waller has opted to go this way with her. She can obviously mix it with the boys. You wouldn't throw her in if she couldn't. So the other thing against her, though, is where she'll land in the run and the fact that she'll be running on with Swift Falcon, you would imagine.
And a good jockey on, obviously, broadsiding. He'll be aware of all that stuff.
Okay, and then the Canterbury Stakes is Ben's favourite race for the day. And I understand why, because you've got 8 individual Group 1 runners in this race. But it's the fact that we're going to get wet conditions that makes this so incredibly interesting for me. A horse like Militarize, I saw him in that track gallop last Saturday and almost fell in love. He looked unbelievable. He wanted to get up and go. And I think Tommy said if he had sneezed on him last Saturday during that gallop, he would have gone hell for leather. So he likes the wet conditions. First up for a long time after the incident at studs. So he is now being gelded. He's my play. He's my play in the race. He looked too good to be true last Saturday.
He would have really let down and been looked at. I mean, I know horses spell their spell. They're not spared anything, but going to start, he would have been really
King.
He would have been absolutely loving life. He's just like back to work, really. So the first week back for him. But 2 stone lighter, they can improve a lot, and he probably didn't need to improve to go close.
No, when you have a look at his record, I mean, he went around, I think he was even single figures in a Cox Plate at one point. So we're talking about a real weight for age star that returns, and having our weight for age stocks, we talked about them for probably 4 or 5 years. We said, we're struggling a little bit. But now suddenly with Via Sistina and Cheerwolf and horses like Militarize, you think, okay, well now maybe we have a rivalry. Cheerwolf, gap between runs, slight hiccup.
13.
Back
No,
to
thank
13. No, $8 to me is poison. Not to say he won't run it. He'll run a good race because he always does. He's a very good
He'll
horse.
be hitting the line as he should, but the drop, and it's not by design. Poor Joe Pride just has had to do that because he had the incident with his leg last week where he was unsuitable to race. So, but I'll wait for him to get to the mile again. I just got to wait.
It's different, but I made the mistake with him in the Epsom. He was 2,000 back to a mile, and I generally don't like horses back in trip, and I thought, no. I sort of looked aside, and he was dominant. This is different. 2,000 to 1,600 is different from 14 back, but he has done it before.
I did think if the market was disrespecting anyone, it was the Stradbroke winner in Steffi. So Steffi has, this is more within her wheelhouse, distance range wise. We know that they're aiming her up as a mile horse this preparation. She's sitting there, I think, 3rd or 4th line, around the $8 mark.
Yeah.
She was fairly unlucky at this stage of the prep last time, shooting up along the inside in what wasn't the preferred going. We're an extra 100 here for to kick off a preparation this time, and the stable could not be more airborne, and the trials have been pure porn. There's not much. Have I given enough of a push?
Yeah, you
that's
sound
definitely
very excited.
That's definitely the way I'm going.
Push much more than that.
What do you make of of Switzerland, the 3-year-old? I love. I'll get your thoughts first.
Yeah, well, it's a really good question. It's obviously a Coolmore winner, and I was surprised to see him win the Coolmore like that off what we'd seen prior. But the stable confidence always said that he was a star. I'd happily sit and watch, and if I get beaten by him, so be it. But
He did have excuses last start, though. Like, you watched him in isolation in the run at Flemington, and he was getting laid all over. Like, he had no clear area just to balance up and run on a day when the weather conditions were crap. He also had horses right on top of him. So I think there were conditions. I think he ran on well down there and over an unsuitable trip. I'd expect him to.
if you look at his
To do
record
something.
holistically, though, it's inferior to a few of these at this point. And I know he's younger, with probably a bit of upside, but
It's just the I mean, the stories within the story, the commercial side of these colts is so interesting. Like, I mean, Chris Waller would be able to line up lots of horses and line up very well. It's amazing. Obviously, when they run and they don't run that well, you're thinking, oh, I wouldn't have thought you'd let that happen. It's almost like you can't leave it up to chance.
yeah.
In fact, he's running again here. Like he'll be fully wound up. Any lever they've got to pull will be pulled. So
And they won't leave it, if he doesn't win on Saturday, they won't leave
No.
it too long until they say, bye-bye,
Yeah.
off you go.
he's just thinking about other things. He's
Yeah.
time to go.
Yeah.
Do you believe in the devaluing? Yeah, once you've won a Coolmore with the breeding that he has behind him, I think it's just locked and loaded.
I think
It doesn't really matter from here.
I think it's locked until you have 5 defeats or something like that. Like, if we stare down another one this Saturday, they're smart enough to know, let's pull up stumps and let him go do his next job. I don't think at this point in time it devalues, but if they let him to continue to race and he doesn't win a Group 1, it does.
They never seem to obviously do that for good reason, but it does. Like, look at a Home Affairs or something. Like, if you want to put yourself up as got all the, it's got the breeding, it's got everything, it's got the physique, and I think once you have a horse that maybe won a Group 2 and was thereabouts, it goes to stud, and it's it might only be a mid-range service fee, but they haven't got. I guess they've got a chance. They've got their chance to make it. Whereas these sort of colts, you need them to be absolute, like
Top line.
and he just beat them all, beat them. Sort of go, he won that race. He did win that one race as a 3-year-old. It's like, yeah, but he didn't do anything else. Like, I agree. They're not going to think, oh, we can't stand him anymore. But he's not going to have that same. When you go to visit the stallions at the stud, they're not going to. And this one is. They'll be like, yeah.
Here's a question for you. Would you rather send your mare
Okay.
to Home Affairs, Switzerland, or Shinzo?
Are you paying the service?
Yeah.
Is it coming out of my hip?
She was busy that day. I'd go to whatever's cheaper. I would.
They're all very similar.
Yeah.
See, for me, I agree they're all similar. Obviously, that's
If
why.
you're selling
Affairs.
it.
That's
Home
why I
Affairs.
threw up the quandary.
Home Affairs.
If you're selling at Home Affairs, you'd
Yeah.
love to take one there.
Yeah. I think it sadly mentioned a good point as we wrap up the podcast for another week. It is D-Day in a way for Switzerland, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Like they want to win this.
Either run well and it's good, or he won't, and that's see you later.
Yeah, for sure. You got to do your pricing and stuff, but is there anything at odds you like this weekend that you want to throw in there that that's caught your eye for
only
the
done-
faithful?
I've done a couple of the races. Have had a good look at the straight race, and you mentioned Stretton Angel. I think if he can get to the outside, he'll run a good race. But Growing Empire is another one. I just think he lost his way mid-race the other day and things against. So I think they're the two that in that race that I'd be warming towards.
My only thought is the Canterbury Stakes is a fantastic race, and I think it should forever hold Group 1 status from this point
Well
on.
said.
I love it, guys. If I was going to have one each way play in one of the other Group 2 races at Randwick on Saturday, I think Kalos for James Cummings, if the rain comes, is well and truly over the odds. I think she can run a really big race.
All right, good luck.
Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
We'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us for So We Think. We'll be back to wrap up the forever Group 1, that is the Canterbury Stakes, next Thursday.
What's gambling really costing you? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.